we're ready to go. We have a brief presentation, as Tracy mentioned. Mike Gregory's going to start off, and then I'll hop in about halfway through to talk about some of the specific next steps with our funding and our citywide flood control strategy, as Brenda alluded to. So Mike Gregory.
All right, thanks, Rob. Okay, so we are here tonight to share some information with you about stormwater. Talk louder. Sorry, one moment. We're here to share information with you about stormwater, what the city is doing to manage that stormwater, what activities are they doing, why are they doing what the city has to do to manage stormwater, what the needs are, not just today's needs, but to meet the service level expectations of the citizens and businesses, and with respect to legislation. There are regulatory requirements. What we could do with stormwater 20 years ago is very different from what we have to do today. So there are future needs, and that of course leads to a funding strategy that staff has been working on. And then we'll get to your questions and answers. When we look at stormwater, there's, if I can be so broad as to define three categories. There's pipes, ponds, and water courses. By water courses, I mean the rivers, the natural stuff, streams and creeks. Here's the pipe assets. There's over 740 kilometers of storm sewers here in the city that the city owns and maintains. 740 kilometers, that's enough to go to Quebec City. If you haven't been in a storm sewer, this is what a clean one looks like in the top right there. There's 11,000 maintenance access holes or manholes, 20,000 catch basins, and that's in the bottom left there if you've never seen a catch basin. These things are designed to get water off the streets quickly into the pipes. And then there's over 300 outfalls. The outfalls are where the pipes go into the ponds or into the natural water courses, creeks and streams, and you see a picture down in the bottom right. If you can believe it, the total value, the replacement value of all these assets that the city owns and operates is over $500 million. $500 million is what the replacement value of these things are. This is just the pipe system. It's all underground. We don't see it, but we rely on it during rainy days like today. Then there are the pond assets. The city owns and operates today 70 stormwater ponds. I'm an engineer, I call them detention facilities, but you see one right there. So again, the types of assets are the pipes, and that's in blue here, delivering it into the next type of asset, the ponds. During a rainfall, the pipes deliver the runoff into the ponds. It's stored there, and then it is discharged into the water courses, that last asset, the natural asset. So what this does is it takes the volume and the pollutant loading that washes off the streets into the pipes and the ponds, it settles out in the ponds. And so that's a way of cleaning the water before it's delivered to the environment in the streams. And in the next decade or so, the number of ponds is probably going to double. Now, the ponds, their function is to hold the water in place, to store it, because there's a lot of volume coming off this development. It's also intended to treat the water quality. By doing that, as I mentioned, it takes the pollutants out of the water that's delivered into the water course. These ponds are designed to trap the pollutants. They fill up with pollutants, which means they will eventually be full. They won't work. They have to be cleaned out. It takes a lot of money to clean out these ponds. Why do we do this? First and foremost, always the top issue for risk management is managing the flood risk, providing that level of flood protection. So really the first bullet and the last bullet go together there. To manage flood risks, that's a big part of what the city does, why we have all this infrastructure here, which is to protect public health and safety and minimize the hazards related to property damage during flooding events. In addition, very recently, the regulations are very dynamic to the middle two bullets, and that's for environmental protection, so that we can maintain healthy streams. If you've never seen a red sign base, that's what one looks like on the bottom left there. We want to protect, the animals and critters that rely on the natural water courses downstream. And then you see an example right in the middle, bottom right of erosion, which is also important to control. And then in the top right, of course, you see the flooding problem. How did we get to this place? What are the pressures and challenges that face, and this is not unique to Markham, this is very common, in Southern Ontario in general. How did we get here? Why do we have stormwater issues? Well, there are changing design standards. As I mentioned, what we could get away with for stormwater management 10, 20 years ago, we simply can't do anymore. Standards have changed. Regulatory requirements have become more stringent. Infrastructure ages. The pipes, the ponds, they have a design service life. They eventually age and need to be renewed and rehabilitated. You've probably heard of climate change. As we look at rainfall, we see there are patterns. It's becoming, intense events are becoming more frequent and more intense. And then urbanization and growth and development. It's happening. You see it here in town. It's very common in Southern Ontario. What urbanization does is it adds, as Brenda was saying, more impervious hard surfaces that generates more runoff, more pollutant loading. We alter the drainage patterns, and sometimes we compact the soil, which really squishes the life out of it. So we're doing our best. Rob's going to talk about sub-watershed studies. It's a big term, but what it's meant is to try and address all these impacts, which is to say there's new standards out there. We can't do what we used to do in the old days. So if we can draw an analogy to cars, in the old days we had old standards. We'll talk about two things, the safety features and the water and quality as well. In cars, there weren't a lot of safety features in the old cars. There's no seat belts or airbags in the top picture there. We do now. We've done better with the safety features. For quality, we didn't have to worry about emissions testing until recently. When we draw, we extend that analogy to stormwater. We have old and new standards. The old standards for safety features, in the past, we would just pipe it and get it out of the way quickly. Now, today, with new, and so the old standards here in this map, and we're sitting in the bottom left corner there, with the old standards, this is before 1978, you see one of the boards there that talks about the different development patterns. For the safety features, we would just pipe it into the stream. Now we have to manage the big storm events. We can't have big pipes to take that water underground into the streams. Now it rises to the surface when the big storm events come. We have to manage the water all the way through the curb and gutter of the streets into the rivers. For water quality, the old standards, the green areas you see up here, there was no water quality standards for stormwater 20, 30 years ago. Now we can't avoid it. We have to treat the quality, treat the pollution that's in the water. So, as you can see, the service level standards for stormwater are not uniform across Markham. In fact, about 20%, so you can see here with the analogy, about 20% of the city needs to upgrade their standards to meet what is required for new development. Higher service levels are needed across the city, starting here. And so Rob's going to talk about that. Some areas require substantial upgrades, and that's what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to hand it over to Rob now.
Thanks, Mike. Substantial upgrades. In West Thornhill, that means about 13 kilometers of sewers being replaced. And along with those substantial upgrades comes a substantial cost. One thing that was evident during the study of the West Thornhill storm sewer capacity was that there wasn't an identified funding source for stormwater upgrades. It wasn't like our water system and wastewater system where there's already a fee that's used to put into reserves and maintain and operate the system. Stormwater funding, just dedicated funding, just isn't available. What we've done in the last year and a half is actually work with council to look at the local funding needs for local projects. West Thornhill was top of mind, so was the Don Mills Channel area as well. It's one of the old standard areas. And we worked with council through a series of workshops to look at funding options that Brenda alluded to at the beginning. And we came up with a strategy, a citywide comprehensive strategy to improve the level of flood service so everybody had the same amount of flood protection. So just back in February, there were decisions made on the strategy, including the level of service that we would apply citywide. We already decided to put a 100-year level of service in place at Thornhill. That was part of the study that many of you were actively involved in. But we've also decided to provide that same level of service citywide, to develop an implementation strategy, timelines and priorities, and to identify funding sources. Dimensions levels are set across the city, and I guess that's important because we need to guide the future studies. The Thornhill design study is done, but we need to know what level of standard we're going to apply in Old Markham or in Unionville. Now, the total cost for upgrades, looking citywide, it's a large sum of money. 155 million is the estimate. And even with a long-term implementation over a 30-year time period, the cost of that would be over $5 million a year. Now, that amount of money is 3 times the existing stormwater funding in the city. We spend money cleaning ponds, we spend money restoring the erosion sites. I might show you some pictures. And we spend money rehabilitating sewers. But to provide flood protection, we have to spend 3 times more than what we're already spending. The funding sources that were decided last month included a citywide fee and a gas tax funding as well to offset that cost. The good news with the gas tax fund is now we can rely on that as a sustainable source of funding. It's been recently indexed to inflation in the last federal budget, so we can rely on that as an offset to fund our upgrades. We're really at the beginning, as Brenda mentioned, in terms of identifying what this fee structure would look like. A citywide fee, that's pretty broad. We have to determine if the fee is going to vary based on property size. Maybe residential properties that are all the same size pay a simple flat fee. A large shopping mall will have a higher fee, sort of in line with how much runoff will run off a larger property. And that would just be fair. That's the sort of principles we're going to be looking at as we get to the nuts and bolts of putting a fee together this year. So what does it look like in terms of expected costs for an average residential property? About $48 a year if we consider no gas tax offset, and lower, $36 a year if we consider gas tax offset to that price. We have more detailed information from the workshops over the last year and a half and council decisions. There's links all online at markhamarena.ca and under a stormwater webpage under the major city projects section. So next steps for us with this direction on level of service, implementation time, and funding source, we're going to get to work on scoping out what a fee structure would look like and report back to council with feedback from the open houses, information sessions we're having over the next few weeks, and suggest to council a way forward. Through the balance of the year, we'll work at fee implementation. Like I said, the nuts and bolts of what each individual property will contribute. And you can expect quite a lot more consultation on that before the rollout, which we're hoping can be next year. As Brenda said, if we don't continue the funding, the projects are going to stop. When the funding's in place, we can continue with more detailed design and tendering of improvement works. We know what direction to take other additional studies in older areas for future projects, for example, Markham, Unionville. So that's pretty well all we have in terms of the presentation. There's a lot more detail on the website. There's a feedback button if you'd like to email us with questions or other feedback on what you've seen regarding stormwater management, the flood control strategy, and in particular the funding sources that we're moving ahead on. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tracy for questions and answers.
Okay, thank you. That was informative. So who wants to start? Does anybody have? So I'm going to start from this side of the room and move this way. And so we will get to everyone. Yes, sir. You'll be second. Okay, thank you.
Just a couple of things. That was a great presentation, by the way. I liked even a little bit of the humor in there as well. But it's not a question, it's a statement. I really appreciate being able to come out to an event like this for an educational component, but also it's an opportunity to see how many people actually truly have an interest in this topic. It's quite large, and a lot of people are concerned about it. So I'd like to thank the local political representatives for putting this on, because they chose to invest staff time in this as well. So thanks for that.
Thank you. That's a good way to start. It is a very important issue in the community. So it's great to see this many folks out. Yes. Yes, you can. And we can pass this around. I have a very loud voice.
I just wanted to know, Rob, through you, I wanted to know, you mentioned about Plaza being charged also for their contribution to the fee to recoup, to be able to do this infrastructure work. So what about churches, what about synagogues, what about schools, what about mosques, what about all the other, is everybody going to be treated equally on this, or do you know that yet?
Well, I guess our intent would be to have broad contribution from as many uses that are contributing to runoff and our flooding challenges. So in particular with regard to a mall, yes, commercial, industrial, we want to target them. They probably contribute about 60% of the runoff in the city. So we'd be looking for equivalent contribution to the fees. Regarding schools and places of worship, that's an interesting question because at the provincial level, there's a disagreement between ministries on whether they can be charged a fee. We know some of them are tax exempt, but they're not utility fee exempt. And our intent would be to try to collect fees from those uses as well. I don't know, Mike could speak maybe from experience in other municipalities what the situation is with those uses.
Okay, so if you're interested in what other municipalities are doing with respect to charging stormwater fees to places of worship and school boards, so as Rob had mentioned, there is legislation, some what appears to be conflicting legislation. There have been legal consultants that have given an opinion. 2 cities have looked at this in detail.
Louder, please.
Yes. 2 cities have looked at this issue about can a municipality charge a fee to certain tax-exempt properties, and that would be the city of Mississauga and the city of Kitchener. They have both decided to do 2 different things. The city of Kitchener does issue stormwater bills to school boards and places of worship. In Kitchener, however, city council decided that they would give a 100% subsidy to places of worship. Mississauga believes that they do not have the authority to charge certain tax-exempt properties. So there have been different legal interpretations with respect to places of worship and school boards and whether the city, the municipality has the authority to enact a fee charge for stormwater.
Thank you.
Yes.
Maybe let me just add one more thing to that. Would you like to give 407 a bill for a change? We haven't actually addressed that, whether
Good question.
places like 407 would contribute, but there's a fair bit of pavement.
Okay, so I'm going to get you in the next suite. I'm going to go to this lady right here. Yes.
My name is Marilyn Ginsberg, and I'm with the Grandview Area Residents Association. I don't actually have a question at this time. I think I'll reserve that for a little bit later on. But I just wanted to tell the people who are here and who maybe haven't been directly involved with this issue, as I and three colleagues, Toinette Bazin, Eileen Liassi, and Ellen Ellison have over the years. Everybody's gotten credit, including us tonight and our members on council. The four people who are here have all been extremely helpful in getting this to the point where it is. But the one person who hasn't gotten credit is actually Rob Muir. Yes, you, Rob. And I just wanted to say that for the four of us who are residents, just like you, and not professional engineers, that we have relied on Rob for his professionalism and for his willingness to share his expertise and his information. And we have found him just to be, as far as we're concerned, the epitome of what a Markham city employee should be. So I'd like to give him the credit that's due for assisting us in the way that every city employee should.
Salary request will be going in soon.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. You showed a picture somewhere on the slides about sort of green driveways, green parking lots, more permeable. Have you given any thought to how useful those are and whether you want to give some sort of a credit to those folks who might want to install something like that to improve the infiltration?
Right. Those are some of the emerging technologies and techniques that we're applying, as Mike mentioned. We require those sort of infiltration type measures to soak water into the ground as part of new standards. TRCA will make all new developments put 5 millimeters of water back into the ground. So we have a base case of requiring that from everybody to reduce the erosion stresses. So it's a good idea. If somebody were to propose deeper storage and they can store a 100-year storm, the big storms that we're addressing for flood control, that is something that we could consider in terms of a fee credit. So they can be implemented at different scales. Small scale helps erosion, but won't offset our flood costs. But if someone were to do it in a big way, yes, that's something we would have to consider.
I saw somebody back here, yes, and then I'll loop around.
I understand that there's $150 million that we don't have to complete this program. I'd like to ask Mayor Scarpitti, how high a priority is this at the city?
Thank you.
Sure.
And welcome, Mr. Mayor.
I was going to make some concluding remarks at the end, but since I was asked a question directly, I'm happy to answer it. This is a very high priority for the city of Markham. And I just want to say, when I became mayor, I take great pride in the fact that we set up the steering committee with the residents on it, because I don't think in the past the information has been shared as good as it's been over the last few years. And so having residents sit on the committee, not only listening to the information, but also witnessing firsthand how difficult the process can be. But I, the council, we all got on this right away. We went through the EA process, and we had a number of meetings over the last couple of years. I hope, and I don't know how deep you got into the history, but when we finished the EA process, there was a resident, I don't know if they're here tonight, they might be, I don't want to single them out, it's everyone's right to do this, but they appealed the environmental assessment that we submitted to the Ministry of the Environment. And that's been part of the frustration, is the delay that caused, because we had to respond then to that appeal, go back out, do some more work, essentially leading to the same recommendations that the EA really recommended in the first place. And then the MOE finally approved our environmental assessment. I can tell you that as the mayor, anytime that we've had an opportunity for infrastructure funding, it's been at the top of my list. Anytime I've talked to staff or CAO, the commissioner, the Thornhill stormwater management remediation, specifically Thornhill, has been at the top of those applications. It was under the infrastructure program. There were some other smaller programs that came out. And I can tell you, once we get the details of the new money that's come from the federal government for infrastructure, this project will also be there. There's a couple of other ones that are also high priority, like the Young Subway extension north of Highway 7. That's a big one for me. But I can assure you that this will be back at the top of the list anytime we get help from other levels of government. As you know, unfortunately, under the infrastructure program, we weren't approved for this project. We did get some pretty good things. Actually, this center right here was renovated and expanded. We got the artificial turf soccer field up in St. Roberts, so that's sort of in the Thornhill area. And then we got an emergency operations center that helps us with storms like we had come through the area. The 4 indoor tennis courts up in Angus Glen, and as everyone knows, the skating rink at the Civic Center, which is the largest in the GTA. So we got great things for the community, but I can tell you every time we've had an opportunity to get assistance from other levels of government from any program, this has been at the top of the list. I did take some exception, I'm going to talk to you personally, but about the letter that you wrote to the letter to the paper, because it gave the impression that somehow we've been sitting on our hands for the last few years, and that just isn't the case at all. It's been a top priority in terms of money. We didn't wait for this whole funding issue to be sorted out. We actually advanced $4 million, I believe, from the gas tax money. So while we were going through this exercise to try and figure out how do we pay for the project long term, well, again, we gave the green light to our staff to get going with something this year and start that construction with the $4 million just to get the process going. So it's a top priority, and it's within the structure that we have to be able to raise funds, which primarily for us is property taxes. And as I said, something of this nature, where you're looking at 40 million is for the Thornhill section, but as you pointed out, Eileen, it's 150 million to solve the issue right across the whole city. And so that takes some planning in terms. First of all, our priority was Thornhill. And so, sometimes the gods look after you in strange ways. They gave you a lot of rain, and that made you the priority for the city of Markham because you went through what you went through. Had that rain maybe been dumped somewhere else that day, in other parts of Markham, and some other parts got some rain, but nowhere near the extent that it was here in Thornhill. But had it happened in some of the older parts of Milliken or somewhere else, maybe that might have been the priority, only because we would have reacted probably the same way we reacted to Thornhill's situation. So I would just say we're going to continue to work. There's more opportunities for us. It's at the top of the list, and so I thank everyone's input and the steering committee that we appointed because our staff did a great job. I think the fact that we had people like yourself, Marilyn, Toinette, and Aline as well, working around that steering committee, it really, I think, gave us the ability to share information, and you were able to see firsthand that our staff were also making this a priority in terms of the project. So I know it's a little bit long-winded because I was going to say some of this stuff at the end, but now you got a short speech at the end of it, so that's a good thing. But thanks to all of you for coming out and your interest in this.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you, Marilyn, Evelyn, Eileen, Toinette, for helping me to hit the ground running when I did join the town. And we wouldn't be where we are today if you weren't contributing. I could also add in terms of priorities, things the city has done in the meantime. On the wastewater system, we didn't have any constraints with EA approvals. We didn't have funding constraints. So Li Jing-Shu in our group, looking at the wastewater system, she's in the front row here, we've achieved a lot of great benefits in terms of disconnecting roofs from the sanitary sewers and reducing flood risks in Grandview, and we're going to continue that through Bayview Glen this year. So there are things that are happening that they're not as obvious as the big pipe for storm, but things have been improving, even on the operational side. So if we have a forecast of a large rain event, Saran gets a notice of that from the Conservation Authority. Brenda sets the operation crews out to priority areas to clean grates around culverts and catch basins. So that happens today all the time. So just some things that we're doing before the big pipes go in.
If I may also say, Ray and I we're the consultants. We have been doing financing studies for about 8 years with many municipalities. TRCA had asked us, Ray and I, to give a presentation in 2006 to Rouge River. It was a task force. All the member municipalities were there. One person came up to us and asked us about this, and it was Mayor Scarpitti came and asked us about this at that time. He was the only one. Markham was interested at that time.
Okay, so I'm going to do what I said and loop over here, and I believe you had your hand up, and then we'll keep looping back. Oh, you can go next. Okay. Okay, so